I watched the Comey testimony, and I found it very interesting for sure. Now, I wouldn't even want to get on into just how people react. Like, a lot of people were like, see, there is no investigation on Trump, which is, they're just saying that because, yeah, that's what, but Comey, of course, technically, I mean, of course he was going to come say somehow that that was true to make it so that he wasn't lying before when he said it. And the gist of it is, yeah, you're not the subject of our investigation. You just keep coming up a lot in our other investigations. And also, that was before he actually fired Comey. And now there's a whole investigator. Now is he inviting, is he still smoking? Is he inviting, well, whatever, scratch that thought. That's what I didn't want to talk about. Cat. Cats wants petting, you gotta watch out, or they go grab your cigarette hand. Here, meow. 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 Okay. So I found a bunch of interesting things. I mean, one is the guy's obviously an operator. You know, anybody thinking that he's siding with progressives or even Democrats from this testimony is not really paying attention. Like, he offered up that thing about Loretta Lynch having said, use the word matter, not investigation. Which is interesting, you know, and I've seen a lot of Republicans now and conservatives jumping on that. She should be Sticks and Hammer was saying, oh, she should be investigated. Which is like, well, if that counts as a prosecutable obstruction, then certainly what Trump did would count. And I think maybe that's the kind of thing Comey's going for. I mean, I think he sets traps. I don't know how good or weak they're going to be. You know, he came out and went out of his way to explain he was the one that leaked his memo indirectly, but basically took responsibility, said, I'd ask the person to do it. Why would he take a hit for something like that? Could at least hit his career. Seems like he knows it's not strictly illegal. It's the kind of thing you could be fired for, the kind of thing that might keep you from getting hired. But, you know, it's like any game you sacrifice upon, you know, you have other moves. He certainly seemed to illustrate, which most people had thought all along, that he created the situation, forcing Sessions to recuse himself, and also a prosecutor to be appointed. Also, he said lie. That was weird. I think in this world where we have a president and people all online and we're talking to each other, calling each other liars about mistakes, about anything, I think, meow. See, communists, you hear? Yeah, we know. So, that's weird though, right? They always say inaccuracies, you know, was incorrect, less than the truth, all kinds of euphemisms to avoid just saying, well, I figured he'd probably lie. I was worried he's a big liar, so he injected that in. Also, I seem to notice that he was dropping the kind of things. I always watch for these kinds of things when you have this sort of testimony. There could be stuff that sounds flashy, but it could just be a bunch of words. But I look for the kinds of things that investigative journalists are looking for, the things that they can confirm. I've noticed this, that good journalists, they're taking notes on the things that they could check up on. It could even be something insignificant, right? It's not how flashy does the fact sound, because the person speaking can send you off on a goose chase around exciting facts, like if there are tapes or not. But he did things like, he mentioned exactly who he distributed the memo to, which will make a subpoena a lot easier, right? Because if you just make a blanket subpoena, it's easy for them to go, oh, we didn't find anything. You send a subpoena to the wrong department, oh, we didn't find it. You say, oh, well, here's the 5 people I was sharing all these with. Not only will your memos get subpoenaed, but they might catch other documents with that subpoena. So that seemed quite intentional, and it seemed like he did that. in a couple of cases, including a hint that sort of threw Sessions under the bus, and then someone leaked what that might be about from the closed hearing, or at least that's what CNN claims. So, yeah, it's definitely a very interesting step. I mean, Trump himself and surrogates are talking about, look, no proof of collusion, no proof of any Russian involvement, and there was no way he was going to come and say otherwise in that case. He's not in charge of an open investigation. He's not going to say what the open investigation that hadn't concluded when he was there concluded, obviously. It was all about, was Comey's firing about the Russia investigation, and putting his testimony under oath up there when Trump has also basically said as much. But Trump is always like, well, I always say all kinds of things. I say this and I say the opposite. You don't know what I think. You can't tell what I intend or what I mean or what I said. So it doesn't really matter. But with him saying that, and then this testimony, it just sort of continues to progress arguments on that score. And I guess the Trump supporters don't really realize that it becomes a separate thing. Obstructing investigations. And especially in this case of Flynn, where people, I've seen these AJW types saying, oh, it's been proven, Flynn didn't do anything. I don't know where you think your facts are coming from. Looks like he did a little something. It's not the worst thing in the world, and it's not something Trump did. But if Trump tried to help him out, and it's like, oh, but he was just friends and he had sympathy for Flynn. He's just for a friend. It wasn't for his own personal gain. That's the same thing. You obstruct justice for a friend out of friendship is just as illegal, and probably the most common reason. Somebody lying to cover up for something a relative did because they love them. So I think we're battling these things out in a war of words that often is just, it doesn't matter at all. It's not what's really going on. And Comey, in all of law enforcement, is a third line. It's like as stuff sheds off from side to side in the press and wags back and forth what it seems like any given day, the judicial and investigatory processes simply go on day by day, and some things stand and some things don't. And they don't stand just because they were popularly believed, though obviously that can influence judicial proceedings, for sure it does. But there's there's also just the standards of evidence, and the AJWs are just, this is another thing Sticks and Hammer was saying. It's like, well, he didn't do anything illegal, so obviously no obstruction of justice. Well, use the internet, dude. That's not, any influence can be obstruction of justice. Any. Even applied, even assumed. A document. Loyalty oaths. These things can be construed into obstruction of justice. Now, I'm not saying they should be or always are, but there's nothing in it saying that it has to be a criminal act in order to obstruct justice, right? Like he didn't have to break the rules of being president. And when you're in a position of power, your ability to make a decision doesn't mean it's free from judgment. Just because you can fire the director for any reason doesn't mean that reason doesn't make you culpable in another case. So I think we'll see. That'll be interesting. The other thing is the UK elections. I don't know that much about UK politics. And I know that probably surprises many of you. Well respected in the AJW community as knowing everything there is to know about politics. But that's mostly in my own country, on a world stage, but just with less detail, So I apologize that I don't know more. But I do find it interesting. It's almost like they don't have rules really over there. They just have ways they do it. And it's going to be weird, though, because I guess they're not going to form a coalition, it sounds like. Still, they're expecting the Unionists, who are this Northern Ireland party that doesn't want Northern Ireland to separate from the UK. They're way more conservative. They're at the other end of the spectrum as you could get in the conservative side of things. So if the Tories link up with them, it just seems weird, because the Liberal Democrats are more like, our Clinton Democrats, and they've joined up with the Tories before, I guess, back in 2010. And that kind of makes sense, right? A coalition between the parties that are right next to each other. But to have your coalition with the party that's way over there, it's going to be an interesting thing. And of course, there's never a guarantee that everybody's going to vote that way, or that Labour won't vote with Tories sometime. On certain things, it could definitely get mixed up. I see a lot of liberals thinking that Corbyn might actually set up something or do this Queen's speech thing, but it doesn't look to me like that's likely. Just, again, maybe there's a maneuver in UK politics that makes that actually possible, breaking with some tradition that isn't set in stone, even though it's been used a long time. But just on a geopolitical analysis, it looks like he'll have the Tories ruling, so-called, with a minority party, so very hard to get things through. Because, see, those Liberal Democrats don't want to work with the Tories this time because they're anti-Brexit. So you probably know that. I hate just saying stuff that you might have probably known. It's a waste of time. I'd rather just say my commentary on the situation, and the people that know what I'm talking about know my comment, and the people that don't could not care or search and make their own opinion, try to find out. Can always use Google. Uh-oh. Did it stop? I guess it didn't stop. Gave me a little notice. Misplaced my main charger, and now this one seems to not charge very fast. So, yeah, just kind of a dispatch, brain dump. I got to the point where I'm having weird feelings about doing videos. I still like doing them, though, and I especially like trying to express my recent opinions, things that I've been thinking about in the recent period, and sort of just going over them to see how you feel and your ideas always turns out different when you try to express it. It interacts. So, thinking of doing a daily just dispatch, don't even wait until I have a subject. Because right now what's going on is there's this little subject that I'm like, I'd like to make a little 5-minute video, but I'm working, I'm doing something else, or whatever. So I don't do it, and then I'll get 4 or 5 of those go by, and then whatever the latest one is, it's like, should I make that other? Should I make this? And it's just like, and I'd rather just go through them quickly, especially since I have tried to make my channel conversational and present, since that isn't working out, because people like Hythloday just don't have the intellect to be in a legitimate conversation for a long period of time in public. Probably, in private or something. So, in which case, it really is just about me expressing myself. And I'm trying to harness that energy to go ahead and just use it like that kind of a medium. So that's what I'm going to do. So it's the lake. It's pretty cold today, though. Yesterday we had a 90-degree day. It's supposed to have something like that this weekend. Time to start swimming. Cheers.